I'm gonna ask everyone to take their seats. We're gonna get started again.
Commissioners, this concludes the taxpayer's case.
Thank you. We'll hear from the Assessors Association.
We'll jump right in. As my first witness, I'd like to call Assessor Elrod. Do what? Tim?
Yes, that's the whole one. So are you going to put something on? Okay.
Mr. Elrod, could you please state your name and current position for the record?
My name is Rod Elrod. I'm the tax assessor in Franklin Parish.
And how long have you been assessor of Franklin Parish?
I was elected in 2007.
And are you a certified Louisiana assessor?
Yes, I am.
And can you tell me how you become a certified Louisiana assessor?
Well, you have to take a series of courses through the International Association of Assessing Officers, through a program designed by the Assessors Association, pass a series of exams, and then continue recertification every 4 or 5 years.
Okay, before we jump into the specifics on Regency's obsolescence request, I want to ask you a few basic questions first. First, as an assessor, what is it that you assess?
I assess the property in Franklin Parish, subject to ad valorem taxes.
And that's all you assess, is the property located in Franklin Parish, correct?
Yes,
The Louisiana Constitution requires that fair market value and use value of property shall be determined in accordance with criteria which shall be established by law. Does it not?
yes, it does.
And the criteria for a law established by law are set forth in Louisiana Revised Statute 472323, which provides that the fair market value of real and personal property shall be determined using the market approach, the cost approach, and or the income approach.
Yes,
Are you familiar with these three approaches to value?
yes, I am.
Revised Statute 472323 also states that uniform guidelines, procedures, and rules as are necessary to implement these criteria shall be adopted by the Louisiana Tax Commission, and that each assessor shall follow those guidelines. Are you aware that the Tax Commission has in fact adopted regulations governing the assessment of pipelines?
Yes, I am.
And those regulations, which appear in Chapter 13 of the Rules and Regulations, direct you to use the cost approach. Do they not?
Yes, I do.
And is that the methodology used to value Regency's property in Franklin Parish?
Yes, it is.
And again, you're required to follow those guidelines, are you not?
Yes, I am.
Now, walk me through in your own words how you go about determining the fair market value of a pipeline. Let's say someone owns 25 miles of 36-inch pipeline that was built in 1998. How would you go about determining the value for assessment purposes?
Well, you would take the miles of pipeline, multiply that by the cost new that the tax commission adopts every year. Then you would look at year built, get a percentage of depreciation, and use that and calculate the cost per mile.
Now, the regulations also provide, and I quote, that functional and or economic obsolescence shall be considered in the analysis of fair market value as substantiated by the taxpayer in writing. And to be clear, in 2022 and 2023, Regency did in fact request an obsolescence reduction in Franklin Parish, did they not?
Yes, I did.
And we're going to get into the information that Regency provided for you in just a moment. But do you consider obsolescence when requested by a taxpayer?
Yes, I do.
Every time.
Yes, I do.
Can you tell me about meetings you've had with Regency Intrastate Gas and its tax reps, property tax partners? First, did you ever meet with anyone that was actually from Regency, or was it always property tax partners?
No, I never met with anybody from Regency. I've met with, people from Property Tax Partners, several times, maybe even many times. Not many, but several.
You previously testified that during one of those meetings, property tax partners brought up the fact that investors were not realizing the anticipated rate of return they expected. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
How does the fact that investors are not realizing their anticipated rate of return impact your opinion of value? Does it even factor in?
It does not impact it at all.
Okay, Assessor Elrod, I want to turn you to Regency submissions to your office. We're going to start with Taxpayer Exhibit 14. Okay, just to keep moving along, make this quick. In that letter, Mr. Gray says that Riggs return values are based on Louisiana Tax Commission Schedule RCNLD, replacement cost due less depreciation. We request that economic obsolescence be applied to the RCNLD values based on an appraisal of Riggs business enterprise fair market value as of January 1, 2023. Does it not?
I don't see it. I've read it, but is it here? Yep. Okay.
And that was in essence the same request they made to your office in 2022 to apply obsolescence and value the property based
On the
on
appraisal.
business enterprise value.
Yes.
The letter also contains a table that lists a total company-wide all parishes LTC schedule RCN of $545,835,004. Mr. Grayson applies a 48.5% obsolescence reduction, which brings the total company-wide value of Regency's property in all parishes to $281,4,500.
Yes.
Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Now, I want you to turn, it's the third from the last page. It's an email from Stephen Grace dated April 5th. If you look at the bottom, it'll be taxpayer 656.
Okay.
Can you read that email to me?
Rod, I hope all is well. After reviewing of our filing for 2023, we discovered that the LTC value on our lat form attachments are based on the 2022 LTC schedule and not the 2023 LTC schedule as we intended them to be. We apologize for any inconvenience, and the attached document contains the corrected schedules where appropriate. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me.
Okay, now this is something I discussed with Mr. Gray, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it. He increased the value under the tax commission tables by approximately $70 million, but the final fair market value after obsolescence remained exactly the same, did it not?
Yes, it did.
So when you cut through the posturing, these obsolescence requests are just a pretense, aren't they? What Mr. Grace is asking, and I
Object
think
to the leading nature of the question.
it's an administrative procedure, rules of evidence are relaxed, I'm allowed to leave.
You're not allowed to lead on direct.
Okay, well, this will slow it down a lot. Assessor Elrod. Based upon your review of this information, is Mr. Grace asking you to value the property based upon the tax commission schedules or based upon the business enterprise valuation?
The business enterprise evaluation. He's not using the tables at all.
So the tables are just a pretense, correct?
They're not asking for obsolescence. They're asking for us to adjust our values to the exact dollar of the appraisal.
And what evidence did Mr. Gray submit to you in support of this request?
He submitted the appraisal.
And that is down the ground. Okay, and the appraiser referencing, there are two of them, but they're both captioned identically except for the effective date. And that is a fair market valuation of the business enterprise of Regency Haynesville Intrastate Gas LLC as of January 1, 2022 and 2023, correct?
Yes.
And other than this appraisal, what information did Mr. Grace provide to you?
Well, he has provided, documents that he discussed earlier, history of the rigs system.
Well, specifically, did he provide any of the data forming the basis of the appraisal?
No,
So all you received was the appraisal, but none of the financial statements or financial projections that Ms. Cartwright testified she relied on to prepare the appraisal, did you?
no, I did not.
Okay, looking at the calculations, and again, this is what Mr. Grace testified to. They took the tax commission table values and reduced them by whatever amount was necessary to reach operating business enterprise value, and they call that economic obsolescence. Is that how your office values property in Franklin Parish for assessment purposes?
No, we would, value the tangible assets.
Well, just to re-ask the question a different way, does your office value property for assessment purposes based upon operating business enterprise value?
No, we do not.
Okay, to dig in that just a little bit, you testified earlier that your job under the Constitution is to value the tangible personal property located in Franklin Parish, correct?
Yes.
And what does an appraisal of the fair market value of the business enterprise of Regency Haynesville Intrastate Gas tell you about the value of Regency's property located in Franklin Parish?
There was nothing specific in the appraisal regarding the property in Franklin Parish.
Now, this is something the courts of the state have addressed a couple of times, and I want to ask you to disagree or agree with a couple of statements. In Transcontinental Gas versus Louisiana Tax Commission, the Louisiana Supreme Court stated that the parish assessors are only valuing portions of physical pipelines situated within their parish. Is that an accurate description of what you did in this case?
Yes, it is.
So you only valued the portions of the pipeline physically located in Franklin Parish, correct?
Yes.
In Transcontinental, the Louisiana Supreme Court went on to say what a willing buyer would pay for a particular piece of pipe in one parish and the apportioned value of a certain amount of pipe in a parish based on what a willing buyer would pay for an entire pipeline transportation business throughout the state might be quite different. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, sir, I do.
You were here earlier when Ms. Cartwright, the appraiser, went through all the data that she was provided in which she used to come up with her opinion of value.
Yes,
Were you
I
not?
was. I was.
Okay, I won't go through everything. We've done it enough now. Was any of the information that Ms. Cartwright identified provided to you or your office?
No, just the appraisal.
I know that back in 2018, Regency provided to you a copy of a 2017 audited financial statement. Have you received any financial statements, audited or otherwise, since 2018?
No, I have not.
Ms. Cartwright also testified that she was provided business forecast for 2022 through 2025. Was any of that information provided to you?
No, sir.
She also testified that she was provided Regency's gross margin assumptions, operating and maintenance capital expense assumptions, general and administrative expense assumptions, and capital expenditure assumptions through December 31st, 2029. Was any of that information provided to you or your office?
No, sir.
Now, separate apart from the lack of any supporting documentation, what does the fair market valuation of the business enterprise of Regency Haynesville Intrastate Gas LLC tell you about the value of Regency's property in Franklin Parish?
Nothing really.
If you turn to page 36 of the appraisal, you will see that it says, and I quote, "To determine Regency Haynesville Intrastate Gas LLC's business enterprise value, we considered all three approaches to value. However, we relied primarily on the income approach, the discounted cash flow method, and the market approach, specifically the guideline company method, since the cost approach generally has little relevance in the determination of market value for a profitable going concern." I want to start with a comment that the cost approach generally has little relevance in the determination of market value for a profitable going concern. You testified that you used the cost approach to value Regency's property, did you not?
Yes, sir, I did.
And why is that?
I was mandated by the, guidelines in the state.
We've already been through the lack of any information, financial reports. So let's get to the market approach. Ms. Cartwright testified that she used what she referred to as the guideline company method. First, have you ever heard of the guideline company method
Yes, sir. Last year in this same hearing?
anywhere else?
No, sir.
Is that anywheres in the rules and regulations promulgated by the Louisiana Tax Commission?
No, sir.
And if you look at page 47 of the appraisal, you will see that what Ms. Cartwright did was that she used stock prices of some publicly traded companies to come up with an estimated sales price. Assessor Elrod, do you use stock prices when performing a market approach analysis,
No, sir.
and why not?
Not relevant.
And what information do you use when you're doing a market approach analysis? Do you use comparable sales,
Yes. Sales and listing.
current listings?
Yes.
And that's pretty standard in Louisiana, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Look, I'm gonna just lump all these into one question. You were here yesterday and also last year when Mr. Anthony and Mr. Lee testified, were you not?
Yes, I was.
And they went through a lot of information, including information that they were provided, in which they used to verify Ms. Cartwright's appraisal. You heard that testimony?
Yes, I did.
And was any of that information provided to you?
No, sir.
And you were also here yesterday when Mr. Jerry Swatnick testified about information he utilized to verify Ms. Cartwright's appraisal, correct?
Yes.
And you didn't receive any of that information, did you?
No, sir. Yes, sir, I was.
Watching the video reminded me of something that I'll be honest, I'd forgotten about, and that is Ms. McCavanagh testified, and I quote, "You cannot just take the pipe that is in Caldwell Parish and say this pipe is worth X." So that's precisely your job. I understand Franklin Parish, not Caldwell, but your precise job is to take the pipe in your parish and come up with the value, is it not?
Yes, it is. Assess it.
And that's what the Constitution requires you to do, is it not?
Yes, it does.
Ms. McCavanagh also testified that over 50% of Regency's revenues were going to property taxes. Did you ever receive any information supporting that claim?
No, sir.
Now, focusing on this complaint about the amount of taxes, you don't issue tax bills, do you?
No, sir. That'd be the sheriff.
You don't collect property taxes, do you?
No, sir.
And you have no way of knowing what taxes Regency pays in other parishes, do you?
No, sir, I do not.
I'm going to object to the continuing leading questions. Mr. Eddington knows how to ask non-leading questions. I understand he's trying to expedite the process, but adding don't you and do you and didn't you to the end of every question only makes it a leading question. It doesn't expedite the process.
Assessor Rod, is the amount of taxes paid on property something that factors into your determination of fair market value?
No, sir.
And you testified a moment ago, you were here when Ms. Cartwright testified yesterday, this morning, and again last year. Ms. Cartwright went through all the information that she utilized and was provided, and I understand none of that was provided to you, was it?
No, sir.
Did you hear Ms. Cartwright testify that if this information were not provided to her, she would wonder if the taxpayer was hiding something?
Yes, sir, I heard that.
Now, Ms. Cartwright also testified that if that information was not provided to her, she would refuse the assignment. Do you, in your capacity as assessor, have the ability to refuse an assignment and not value property located in your parish?
No, sir, I do not.
And to fulfill your constitutional mandate, you rely on information that taxpayers provide to you?
Yes, sir.
Now, it's technically leading, but I understand your office has 5 employees. You assess 40,000 parcels owned by 11,000 separate taxpayers. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir, that sounds right.
Do you have time to bird dog, to run down every submission by a taxpayer that is incomplete or doesn't require all information?
No, sir.
What do you rely on?
Taxpayer submissions?
Is that not particularly true with a company on the scale of Energy Transfer?
Yes, sir. Energy Transfer is a massive company. I don't know. The only information I know about them is what I'm presented with.
Ms. Cartwright kept insisting that an appraisal has to be based on forward-looking projections. Now, this is something the courts have addressed in the Regency case, in fact, in which they have held the tax commission's, and I quote, refusal to consider Riggs' revenue losses projections in the determination of its pipeline properties 2018 fair market value. Now, this is something you testified to in 2018, 2019, 20, 21, and 22. But since they keep bringing up this claim, I need to ask you again, do projected future losses impact a current property year's tax assessment?
No, sir.
Now, as we discussed earlier, the tax commissioner's rules direct you to value property using the cost approach and also require you to consider obsolescence as substantiated by the taxpayer in writing.
Yes, sir.
And you considered Regency's obsolescence request for tax years 22 and 23, did you not?
Yes, sir, I did consider it.
And you reviewed all of the information, the appraisal that Regency's tax rep provided to you, did you not?
Yes, sir.
And did you, in the exercise of your discretion as assessor, consider the information that Regency submitted to your office in support of its request for a reduction in value for obsolescence sufficient to warrant such a reduction?
I did not.
Assessor Roy, can you just tell me in your own words why you rejected Regency's obsolescence request for tax years 2022 and 2023?
Well, that's the crux of the matter we're dealing with, I think. What they asked me to do is disregard the tables in the tax commission guidelines and accept completely the business operating appraisal. I'm not saying that appraisal is wrong. Ms. Cartwright is an impressive person, but I don't know that it's right. The projections that she used, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. According to the testimony yesterday, some of Regency's projections have been wrong. So I was not willing to disregard the tables adopted by the tax commission and instead substitute in whole an appraisal. That's why. I don't know that the appraisal, it's an opinion. I don't know that it's right. I don't know that it's wrong. But I know there are some facts, and those facts are that we have 42-inch pipe and 30-inch pipe in Franklin Parish. It was carrying gas 10 years ago. It's carrying gas today as we speak. and it will be carrying gas 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30, 40, who knows? They said that Energy Transfer was going to be here for the long term. This is not a project that you buy a house and put a coat of new paint on it and flip it. This is a long-term project. The pipeline is working today. Now, they're not making the revenue that they once made, but they're still making revenue. So I denied the request for obsolescence. No, I'd answer any questions I have. Sure.
Hi, Mr. Elrod. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thank you.
All right, as part of the classes that you have to take to become a certified Louisiana appraiser, did they teach you how to calculate functional obsolescence?
We discuss it, yes.
Did they teach you how to calculate economic obsolescence?
Yes,
Okay, so
Yes.
the Louisiana guidelines are replacement cost new, less depreciation,
yes,
less functional obsolescence, less economic obsolescence equals fair market value.
yes.
Okay, so if economic obsolescence is present and you don't account for it, do you get to fair market value?
Not quite.
So what is the definition of fair market value?
What a willing buyer and a willing seller would agree on.
That's right. Is there anything in that definition about assessments or assessor valuations?
No,
So I noticed in Mr. Eddington's testimony, they very carefully didn't ask you if you gave fair market values. He asked you if you gave assessments. Do you believe that after everything you've heard yesterday, today, and the prior hearings, that your assessments equal fair market value for this pipeline system?
there may be obsolescence. I'm not saying there is. But if there is obsolescence, there's no way to determine what the obsolescence in Franklin Parish is from the appraisal.
So actually, we were talking about sticks by sticks, and the renditions that were submitted in your parish and in the other parishes have the RCNLD and then have the percentage obsolescence as calculated, described by Ms. Cartwright and
Sure.
Mr. Grace. So it does have it broken down to your parish stick by stick.
Not really.
Okay, where's the
They,
gap there?
It's broken down to meet Ms. Cartwright's appraisal, and the percentage of obsolescence is backed into.
Oh, backed into. What do you mean backed into?
Well, the percentage of obsolescence is calculated once we reach Ms. Cartwright's values. Whatever percentage it takes to get to her value.
It's actually the opposite, isn't it? Isn't it the percentage that takes to get from your value to her value?
Yes.
Okay. So when you were authorized to do an income approach and a market approach, you're not required to do only the cost approach.
That's right.
Okay. So under what circumstances might you find it necessary to do an income approach?
Well, truthfully, I'm not qualified to do an income approach on Energy Transfer. I wouldn't attempt to do it. That's Ms. Cartwright's line of work. Therefore, I followed the cost approach guidelines and the tax commission guidelines.
So if you're not qualified to do it, but you recognize that it's and I'm not talking about Riggs specifically, but if you have a property in your parish and it needs to be assessed using the income method and you're not qualified to do it and you use a cost approach, but it still doesn't get to value, to fair market value, don't you have some obligation to?
Well, I can do the income approach on the businesses in my parish. We heard testimony yesterday that Energy Transfer had 29 pages of organizational chart and 10,000 employees. I wouldn't attempt to do that. That's much different than doing a grocery store or a convenience store, using the income approach.
But isn't it the same sort of information that's in that kind of income approach as what Ms. Cartwright did for her opinion?
Probably the same information on a much greater scale and detailed. And we heard Mr. testimony yesterday that they're pretty they keep that information close to the vest regarding contracts. The idea that I would call Energy Transfer and say, I need to see your contracts, that wouldn't happen.
But have you tried? Have you ever asked Mr. Grace for contracts or forecasts?
No,
Have you ever hired Pritchard and Abbott?
yes.
Okay, what have you hired Pritchard and Abbott for?
We have a consultants on a natural gas storage plant.
Okay.
I've never hired them for a pipeline.
Back to the income analysis, the discounted cash flow is a discounted cash flow. I mean, business by business, it's still a discounted cash flow.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, would you agree that it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Based on everything that you've heard last year and then yesterday and again today, would you agree that a market approach or an income approach is a better way to value pipeline like this over cost approach?
It's my understanding that the approach that you're using is used for interstate pipelines by the tax commission, assessed by public service. I think the courts have ruled that we are to use a different approach on interstate pipelines.
Well, certainly the public service property taxpayers that are valued by the tax commission are valued under a different methodology.
Yes.
But my question is, do you think that you could use income market for a pipeline? I mean, there's nothing that prohibits you from doing so.
No.
So we go round and round with this every year. If the company submits the information on the tables, stick by stick, like Mr. Grace did, and they provide 5 or 6 pages of introductory materials that set forth graphs and charts, they quote publicly available information, they provide you with double top secret company information, and they believe that it substantiates economic obsolescence. Do you not owe them some sort of explanation of what you actually want? Because to Mr. Roussel's point, they've been providing information to you for years. You've been rejecting it for years. They keep adding to what they submit. Each year they add another paragraph, they add another attachment.
Mhm. As I said before, Energy Transfer has a 29-page organizational chart, 10,000 employees. They're one of our largest taxpayers in a rural parish. If they come into my office asking for a 30, 40, 50, or even a 60% reduction in value, I would expect them to provide me with something that will convince me. I'm reminded of the Supreme Court justice who spoke about pornography in 1964. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. I don't know what Mr. Grace could provide to me. We've got financial projections groups, financial documents group, lawyers, engineers, etc. They need to convince me that the pipeline is only worth half of what we say it is according to the LTC guidelines, and they've not yet done that.
So, and let me follow up on this on a couple of things. First of all, the replacement cost new guidelines treat the property as if it was going to be rebuilt today. What
Yes.
would they rebuild it at? Is that a fair way to state it?
Yes,
Okay, so based on all the information that you heard, do you think that Mr. Anthony was lying when he said he would only rebuild it as a 30-inch pipeline or a 36-inch pipeline?
no, I don't think he was lying at
Do
all.
do you believe the capacity and compression report that said that it could, all the gas that's going through that 42-inch pipeline could be sent through the existing 30-inch pipeline?
I'm not privy to Energy Transfer's projections or business model, but it could be that they built the pipeline 42-inch in 2009 because it was much cheaper in 2009 than it is now. They could want that excess capacity in case these projections change.
I understand that, but you were provided a copy of the capacity report, the compressor run analysis, I think that was conducted by one of their engineers.
Yes,
That said,
I've seen it.
yeah, do you have any reason to doubt the conclusions or the underlying information in that report?
No, when they say they are not using 100% capacity. I don't have any reason to doubt that.
But isn't that in and of itself an indication of obsolescence? If they're not using everything that they have, it's overbuilt, which is the very definition of obsolescence, isn't it?
That could be.
So do you have any other similar pipelines in your parish?
We have several pipelines in our parish, big ones. But they are assessed by the Public Service Department of the Tax Commission. I assess 2 or 3 other pipelines in the parish that are much smaller than Regency,
Okay.
gathering lines.
Thank you. Okay.
This is the only largest pipeline that we have that I assess that is requesting this amount of obsolescence.
So do you have it within your discretion if they roll in and say, you know, here's my information that substantiates, in our opinion, 50% obsolescence? Do you have the authority to say, what about 25% obsolescence?
Yes, I do.
And have you done that? Have you made any offers to them at all for something less than the full amount that they?
We've
put in the
we've
report?
talked over the years. This has gone since 2014. There's a basis to their argument. I see their point. But they need to see my point as well. My point is that the pipeline is there.
Hmm.
It's utilized every day. The fact that they have contracts at a smaller price, I expect that was anticipated when they signed the contracts for 30 cents and 5 cents for a 10-year period, knowing they were going to roll off. Those more contracts, higher contracts, seem to me to be revenue to build the pipeline. I don't know what the industry standard is for a contract to move gas. They're getting 10 cents, 12 cents now. That might be the going rate.
So if you wonder about that, why not ask Mr. Grace?
Well, we've talked about it,
Okay, so,
and as well as with Mike Smith.
so with respect to the pipeline that is out there, that you said, it's out there in the ground and they're using it. But they built a 42-inch pipeline and they're only shipping gas that they could ship in a 30-inch pipeline. If they were going to rebuild it today, they wouldn't have a 42-inch pipeline out there.
Well, that's what they say, but they also said there was no way to get gas south, and there obviously is. They were paying to contracts to get gas to the east to go north. Gas is flowing south. The same interchange can put it south.
Right. No, absolutely. You're right. They were sending it north. Now they're sending it south, but it's still the significantly reduced volume of gas.
Which could change at any time.
You are absolutely right. And what is the date that you have to place value on?
January 1.
January 1st. So not what could happen in the future, but on January 1.
Right.
Yeah. So back to the appraisals. You read the appraisals, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay. So as you were reading through the appraisals, and it's similar to the appraisals that you had gotten in prior years, and you looked at the financial information, you know how to do an income analysis, so you
Yeah.
looked at the income information. Was there anything in the income information that that struck you as off? The numbers didn't make sense, or the conclusions were wrong? Anything like that?
No, I didn't have any way to verify the numbers, but nothing struck me as off.
So if you wanted to verify the numbers, did you think about reaching out to Mr. Grace and saying, hey, I have a question about these numbers. Can we get on the phone with somebody?
We talked about the numbers.
But you weren't satisfied.
I think he's an honest man.
I'm sure he appreciates that.
I go back to business enterprise value on the whole system. I'm supposed to value the pipe, the assets in Franklin Parish. By taking that value, which I don't know if it's correct or not, and applying it equally across the line, I'm not sure that's correct.
So one of the comments, I think, from last year was if the same level of obsolescence had not been applied uniformly across the line, that there would actually be more obsolescence
Well,
in your parish.
I heard that. That's a matter of opinion. It could
Yeah.
be, I'm the far eastern part of the line. If I'm not there, they can't go north or south. So in that case, my parish may be more important than any other. Or it may be that the interchange in Jackson Parish or the compressors in Caldwell Parish are more important. But without Franklin Parish and the interconnect with the other trunk lines going north and south, it's like you talk about taking one part out. If you
Mhm.
take my part out, there is no rig system.
So if would anyone ever just buy your segments that are in your parish?
No, but I could say that I'm the most valuable part of the line. Otherwise, the gas would stop in Jackson Parish and they wouldn't be able to sell it. Without my interchanges, they're out of business.
So if someone were to lop off if I understand you correctly, if someone were to lop off the pipeline that's in your parish, that the entire system would have no value?
Well, they couldn't deliver gas. They would have short trunk lines, but they can't connect to the big lines. Now, that could be argued either way. Other people may say their parish is the most valuable. I'm just saying that has never been determined on the obsolescence in each parish.
So I just want to, I think that's Jackson Parish in the middle. If you look at the chart that's over there, there's a couple of red dots and a couple of green dots. Oh, that's Caldwell?
Yep.
Which one? Okay. Yeah.
Jackson Parish may argue, I think he said he shipped gas north to Arkansas. They may argue that they're the most valuable portion of the line.
Yeah. So there in Caldwell Parish, you've got Texas Gas and 2 trunk lines. So if you were to lop off the pipeline in your parish, wouldn't they just use a Texas Gas and trunk line?
Maybe.
And I guess the same could then be said
yeah.
for Caldwell. If
Yeah.
Caldwell, if you lopped off those
Right.
takeoff points, it would just go to you.
I'm not saying a definitive answer that I'm the most valuable. I think the case could be made for any one of the 3 parishes. I'm saying that obsolescence in each parish has not been determined.
When you looked at Ms. Cartwright's appraisal and you read the information about her chart, you saw her charts and you saw her narrative about the company projections, you saw the charts about the company projections. Did you believe that information was incorrect?
No, I didn't believe that. I'm not sure it's correct, but I didn't not believe it.
Okay. There's been a lot of discussion about the income statements and balance sheets that were restated by Ms. Cartwright in her appraisals. Did you have a need for the underlying documents, what we've been calling the raw data?
Had I wanted to impeach Ms. Cartwright's appraisal, I would have nothing, no data to impeach that with. I didn't have the underlying financials.
So if you didn't know if the information was correct, and surely you would want to know, why not just ask for it?
Well, I'll go back to what we said earlier. Energy Transfer and Regency are giant companies. I'm a one-man band in a rural parish with 4 or 5 people. If they want me to have something, they should bring it to me. I don't know exactly what I need to look at.
So when someone like Mr. Grace, who was an appraiser, sends you this information and represents that he believes it is sufficient to substantiate obsolescence, I mean, assessor to assessor, assessor to former assessor,
Well,
you don't want to talk
we're-
to him and say, where are you coming from?
we're speaking now as tax rep to assessor.
Okay.
Everybody's got to do something for a living. And
Some of us get stuck being lawyers.
we get information from tax reps all the time that, is not good. Now, I have a good relationship with Mr. Grace. Uh, I don't have any reason to believe that anything he has given me is incorrect.
All right, give me just a second. I think that might be all my questions.
Sure.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you mentioned that you use Pritchard and Abbott for the public service pipelines?
No,
Oh, you use, what do you, I'm sorry, what do you use them
we
for?
have a gas storage facility.
Okay, have you ever, who does the, oh, because it's state assessed, there you go. Sorry, I answered my own question. So have you ever, reached out to Pritchard and Abbott about, this property or to,
No, I have not.
okay. Does
It-
Pritchard and Abbott do an appraisal, a use PAP appraisal for the property that they do?
No,
work for? Okay,
that's a large taxpayer. I determined the assessment on that facility. I had, Pritchard and Abbott on contract in case I have to come to a hearing like this. And somebody with, more, well, you know him. I would bring him along to help,
okay.
but I've
Would that
never,
be Mr. Crett?
yes, I've
okay.
never had to use him. I've paid him, but not used him. Sorry.
That sounds like the gig we need. I think that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Elrod.
Nice to see you again.
You too.
Now, dividend income, of course, analysis, you need financial statements and balance sheets, do you not?
Yes,
Frank finally admitted that that information was never provided to you, was it?
no, it wasn't.
Also, discussion double top secret information. Capacity report. Now, you were here yesterday when Mr. Ron Lee testified, were you not?
Yes,
Paul, what point was regarding the utilization level in 2022?
was that the 93% we're speaking of?
I just have one follow-up about Mr. Lee's testimony. You understand that that's,
That's
a
without the
fact of-
compressor.
yes, thank you. And the renditions in your parish are on the property as is at the diameter that it is, not based on the compression.
Yes.
Assessor.
No questions?
Yes, sir. I have a couple of questions. And I apologize that you're the first up because my questions to you would be the same to the other two assessors that I
Well, I can
imagine
let
are
them
going
handle it
to.
if you'd like.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I'll be happy. You're
Yeah.
doing quite well.
Sure.
So as I appreciate state law, you must consider obsolescence.
Yes.
True? As
Yes. Yes.
yes, sir. I'd like to continue on to the final end as substantiated by the taxpayer in writing. Did the taxpayer provide information to you timely in accordance with rules and regs?
I'm sorry, did they?
Did the taxpayer provide information to you relative to their open book or their renditions timely?
Yes.
And that information included the appraisal from Ms. Cartwright?
Yes.
In your, how do you, so you, but when you consider obsolescence, is it, I think about it, or do I actually go through a formulated calculation that I can say, okay, I've got enough information to do income, which is from financial statements, or a market, or a cost? And did you say you were qualified or not qualified to do an income approach?
Well, I can do an income approach.
It's just yes or no.
Are you speaking of an income?
Are you qualified to do an income approach? Do you do an income approach regularly on your properties?
Yes.
Did you do an income approach here
No.
because you didn't have financial statements?
Yes, that's one reason.
Are there financial statements that are listed and presented in the appraisal?
They are.
Do they meet the terminology that you're accustomed to for a financial statement?
Yes.
So you did an income approach. you also are supposed to use a market approach. And a market approach is based upon comparable sales. Did you find any comparable sales?
No,
So you couldn't use a market approach.
no, we had a sale, from years previous that was under some discussion, the Alinda sale. It doesn't seem to be a factor now. Nobody's bringing that up.
The Alinda sale referenced in the sale of the joint venture to,
Yes,
but it's all the same system.
yes, same system.
You have a staff of 5.
Yes,
They theoretically, the information that's been proffered, if I've used that terminology correct, you and your team receive that. If you receive that.
Yes.
Do you have the manpower to handle every internal financial statement coming to you to validate information to another source? Or do you selectively choose?
it would be a chore. Yes,
Could you or could you not?
I could.
Do you do it for everybody?
Nobody usually questions it. I don't usually question theirs.
You don't question what they submit that does not include financial statements?
No, the financial statements. I'm
Okay,
not
I'm
sure I understand the
confused.
question.
The question is, with a team of 5, if Regency would have provided what the attorney for the assessors is presenting was
Yeah.
not presented, if that's the line in the sand, that if that were presented, would that have substantiated Ms. Cartwright's appraisal? Would your team have evaluated that
Yes.
for each and every taxpayer?
Well, for this one, nobody else has a project nearly this size.
You spoke about if I recall correctly, you seemed to give credibility to Ms. Cartwright and her experience in her report.
Yes. I thought she was, impressive. I taught at the university for several years, and what it takes to stand up and, compel an audience is, noteworthy.
And you also mentioned the change in contract price
Yes.
from 30 cents to 10 cents. So you were aware of an economic change in this gas pricing, were you not?
From the hearing last year,
Prior to that, you were never aware of a change in gas prices?
not as it relates to rigs, no.
I'm just speaking in general with natural gas movement.
Well, I know natural gas moves up and down, just like the price of oil.
Was that part of your consideration of obsolescence from an income approach or not?
No,
Were any compressors moved off of your tax rolls?
no, sir. We didn't have compressors.
You didn't have any compressors on your tax rolls. So you didn't have a market approach. You couldn't do an income approach. So you relied upon a cost approach only.
Yes,
And is that by definition acceptable to meet all the standards of consideration of obsolescence? I guess my question is your inability enough, is that sufficient to say, well, I can't do an income, I'm going to disregard that, there's no market, so I'm only going to rely upon cost?
there might be obsolescence. If there is, my point is that I can't calculate it from the appraisal.
Why?
It's not allocated according to parish.
I understand. I totally acknowledge that.
Yes, sir.
I think that's the second point of this. The point is the value of the company using their discounted cash flow, did you think of that as a valid income approach that you yourself could not do?
Well, I have no reason to doubt it. Ms. Cartwright was impressive. She had, financial documents. I'm a little bit leery of the projections used for future. If they're not valid, then the final, figure is not valid.
You also mentioned that you met with Mr. Grace.
Several times
When and how?
in my office, and
Over the course of from 2014 forward, because there
Yeah.
are emails that gave the indication that you were not meeting of
Well,
recent.
no, we didn't meet the last time, but we've been meeting, since 2014. I've met him here at these hearings many times, and, we've visited in my office several times,
Every year?
pretty much every year, yes. Wouldn't you say? I mean, with some exceptions, but pretty much.
That's all the questions, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions by the commission? I have one. Oh, I have one.
Yes,
Is it the responsibility of the assessor or is it the responsibility of the taxpayer to provide the documentation necessary for the assessor to make his evaluation?
the responsible of the party that's seeking the obsolescence.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Yeah.
Commissioner Roman had asked you about doing income approach valuations, and would you have the ability to do it if everyone requested it? Now, in a rural parish, you don't get a lot of requests for income approach
No.
valuations, do you?
No,
And had Regency provided the data you would need, the actual financial statements, which are taxpayer proffers, so you haven't seen them, would you have had the ability with that information to do an income approach valuation?
probably.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
I have just one follow-up to that. You said if you, had gotten the, the proffer documents, you would have been able to do an income, but you weren't able to do it from the information that was in the appraisal. Did I understand that correctly? Isn't it the same information?
Well, they say it is.
So if it is the same information and four people have testified that it was, I'm assuming that they're correct, would you have been able to do the income approach?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Elrod.
So as a follow-up, just on that, again, I'll go back to the credibility you're giving Mrs. Cartwright and her report. She's attesting, she has a reputation, she has a career.
Sure.
She's presenting financial statements in the appraisal, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Jackson Parish Assessor Glenn Kirkland. Good afternoon. Can you first identify yourself and your current position?
My name is Glenn Kirkland. I'm the Jackson Parish Assessor.
And how long have you been assessor of Jackson Parish?
I was elected in 2015.
And are you a certified Louisiana assessor?
I am.
And you heard Assessor Elrod testify to the requirements to become a certified Louisiana assessor. Your understanding or the requirements that you met are similar?
I do, yes.
To kind of jump all these together, you were here yesterday when Mr. Anthony and Mr. Lee spoke, were you not?
I was.
And you were also here last year when they testified, were you not?
Yes, I was.
They went into great length discussing information that they had received from the Financial Planning and Analysis Division of Energy Transfer. Was any of that information ever provided to you?
No, it was not.
What I found most particularly interesting about Mr. Anthony's testimony was his discussion of how Energy Transfer goes about valuing assets. I understand that's different than what you do, but it at least has the ability to come up with a valuation for the assets located in a single parish. Now, you heard Mr. Anthony testify the information that would be required to perform that valuation exercise, did you not?
I did.
And was any of that information provided to you?
No, it was not.
And also, he did testify last year, but Mr. Jerry Swatnick testified yesterday. You heard his testimony?
I did.
And you heard him describe the information that he had received from the Financial Planning and Analysis Division?
Yes, I did.
And none of that information was provided to you, was it?
No.
And you were here when Ms. Cartwright testified yesterday afternoon and again today, were you not?
I was.
And you heard Ms. Cartwright testify the information that was provided to her by Energy Transfer, in which she used to conduct her business enterprise valuation.
Yes.
Did you receive any of that information?
No, I did not.
Now, you brought something up interesting at dinner last night, and you noted that Ms. Cartwright had testified that it was not possible to go back and double check the numbers for Regency based upon publicly available information. And you told me actually, as you're sitting in the room, got on the internet, and you tried to do that, did you not?
I did.
And were you able to come up with any information about Regency's financials?
No.
Did you find anything else that interested you in that
Well,
exercise?
I did. I did. And of course, I've talked back and forth with Steve through the years, trying to learn, from him. He knows the subject well, and I've been dealing with him before I actually took office. First met him in 16. And I try to discuss it with him to try to learn. I didn't come here knowing all the answers. I've been assessor 8 years now. But we've been talking about this, or we've been listening to them talk about this whole entire system and this unit method. And that one part can't act alone from the rest of it, which I tend to disagree, depending on what part you're talking about. However, Riggs is a subsidiary of Energy Transfer. So I could not find any information on Riggs, so I looked for some financial information on Energy Transfer, which was readily available there for these specific years for 2022 and 2023. It was a 17-page document. I went through it. I couldn't find anything about Riggs or about how dire the situation is. Of course, this is financials that they're putting out there, probably wanting to make themselves look, nice to these other companies that they may do business with. But I did pull from it, and it's stated in there. This came out in February, and it was talking about the year-end 2023 financials of Energy Transfer. Now, I understand Energy is a large corporation, okay? Riggs is a partner of that. It said the revenue attributable to the partners of Energy Transfer for the year ending 2023 had generated a revenue of $1.3 billion. This was a $172 million increase from the 2022 financials for Energy Transfer. But I couldn't find anything within that talking about Riggs because it's just not available.
Okay, Senator Kirk, let's kind of get down to the basics. Something I like that fire is also if you're doing under the Louisiana Constitution, value the property.
That's correct.
That's all you say.
That's correct.
Don't value this entire system on this map. Do you?
I do not.
And you use the valuation table published in chapter 13 of Louisiana rules and regulations, do you not?
I do.
What does the operating business enterprise value of the pipeline system, again, the pipeline system on the front to your left, tell you about the value of Regency's property located in Jackson?
It doesn't specifically tell me anything about the property in Jackson Parish.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no further questions. Please answer any.
Hi, Mr. Kirkland.
Hi.
So you heard the questions that I asked of Mr. Elrod, and I'm going to ask the same sort of questions of you. As part of your classes to become a certified assessor, you were required to learn how to calculate functional obsolescence.
That's correct.
Yes. And economic obsolescence.
That's correct.
And you're familiar with the equation, I guess, for lack of a better way to describe it, that replacement costs new, less depreciation, less functional obsolescence, less economic obsolescence equals fair market value.
That's correct.
And without, if obsolescence is present, without recognizing obsolescence in the equation, you don't get to fair market value.
I would agree with that.
So you were here last year, you were here for 2 days today, and everything that you've heard, do you believe that your assessments equal fair market value?
Well, we've heard a lot of information, a tremendous amount of information. And, you know, everything that we've heard is based on the business enterprise value of this entire system, okay? This system, like they said, 2005, the 30-inch was installed. The lower Cotton Valley in my parish was booming back then. I think Mr. Anthony may have mentioned 200 million a day of gas there. So, you know, they later come on and added the, in 2009 or 10, added the 42-inch. And, you know, once they did that, and excuse me, I'm trying to get my train of thought back.
No,
We've heard so
take it.
much over the last 2 days.
Yeah.
And Mr. Anthony was an excellent witness. He knew the material really well. So, and I've tried to listen to everything. I've taken several notes. And, you know, after the inception of the 42-inch being installed, and I understand now they're saying they're not flowing enough gas to actually use the full potential of that 42-inch. However, I think when some of these projects, what I've read, some of these projects, when they're built, you can build a project to double your capacity, but it doesn't necessarily double your construction cost. So sometimes the companies will do that just to have a larger capacity, depending on, they didn't know at the time exactly what the Haynesville Shale was going to do, how long it was going to continue. They didn't know at the time what the lower Cotton Valley was going to do, what the national concerns and markets were going to do. You know, once they brought that other one on, you know, Mr. Anthony mentioned that they were, I believe it was $11 million a month that they were generating revenue off of that. And it's quite a bit of revenue. Now, I know now that it's not that much, but
So I think he said $11 million a month, and now they make $11 million a year.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a big difference.
Definitely a big difference. And does that not indicate to you that that there's obsolescence in this system? If they went from $11 million a month to and let's say that those are the right numbers, $11 million a month to $11 million a year, that doesn't indicate to you that this system is overbuilt?
Yeah, I think it does for the present time that we're talking about. Now, if they move rigs in tomorrow and start flowing more gas, are you going to want a 30-inch? Or are you going to want something that can carry enough gas that you could flow that they could supply?
Right. So establishments that Mr. Elrod, the data value for your parish is January 1.
That's
So
correct.
what might happen in a couple of years for your purposes, what happened a few years ago, you know, you're supposed to value it at the $1 million a year revenue as opposed to the possibility of something else.
Well, you know, like Ms. Cartwright testified, first, she a couple of times alluded to the definition of fair market value that we have here in Louisiana. Now, they talked about valuing in other states too. Why, I don't know, because we're addressing what's happening in Louisiana. And she mentioned also a couple of times that she thought the schedules that we use were very accurate. She had no reason to believe that they were not. However, I know that is replacement cost new, less depreciation. You know, when they were making the $11 million a month, we were using those same schedules. We didn't ask for any additional tax money. We relied on the schedules that are in place that we're required to use by the Constitution. We're doing the same thing now. Of course, everything that we've heard, the revenue has come down. And, you know, we've been dealing with this, I guess, since 18 in my parish. First met them in 16. And we talk to them we talk to them every year. We haven't met every year, one reason being COVID. But I've met with them probably 4 times, maybe, something like that. Mhm.
So obviously, back when they first started flowing from the Haynesville Shale, the situation was very different. And they paid the taxes. They weren't asking for obsolescence, right? They weren't asking you to adjust their values back in the first few years.
Well, I only came along in 17, so that's
Okay.
all I could
All
attest
right,
to.
so by the time you came along, though, the financial situation had changed and they were no longer shipping at the same values and generating the same revenues.
That's correct.
All right. So let's talk about an income approach. We had this conversation with Mr. Elrod about doing an income approach. Do you have the knowledge and experience and skill set to do an income approach?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So based on an income approach, you calculate the discounted cash flow, right?
Right.
Okay. And that's based on what?
Pardon me?
The discounted cash flow is based on what?
It's based on projected assumptions and projections into the future.
Okay. And so how far out do you typically go for those assumptions?
Personally, I haven't calculated any DCFs for anything in my parish.
Okay.
Now, well, take that back. We now value oil and gas wells with a DCF. So I do value that, but not any large companies like this, nor any other income producing companies.
Okay. But if you wanted to, you would use financial statements, balance sheets, and projections.
That's correct.
Okay. So we've talked about this a great deal. Information was provided in the appraisals that included reprints of the income statements, the balance sheets, narratives and charts about the forecasts and company projections. Did you review that information?
I did.
And did you find it to not be valid?
Well, just as Ms. Cartwright testified, she works for many oil and gas companies. A lot of times the information she gets, she said in her own words, wasn't credible, and she has to come back and ask for, why did you send me this? Send me something that supports this. And of course, with her dealing with the financial department, the reporting and the financial analysis group, she was able to do that. We had no way of the information that we had to do that. We could look at it and read it, and it's a lot of compelling information there. Tremendous, appraisal, several pages.
Yeah. So could you have asked Mr. Grace to provide some raw data or backup data if you had any questions about it? You said she had the ability to ask for additional information. Under the Louisiana law, you have an ability to ask, and the rules and regulations, you have the ability to ask taxpayers for additional information. Did you not want to? Why wouldn't you?
No,
If you
we
want to get
talked
to fair
about it.
market value, wouldn't you ask them for what you need?
We talked about it, but it's their obligation to substantiate in writing the obsolescence that they're requesting.
I understand that. And when they ask you, please tell us what we need, and your answer is, it's up to you to figure it out, we find ourselves in this years-long circle.
Yeah,
Right.
several years, yeah.
Right. So if there's something specific that you want, can you tell me what it is right now?
No, I can't. I don't think that's my job. I
Right.
mean, they're a large organization, like you mentioned, 29 pages of their flow chart, 10,000 employees, financial planning, financial analysis, financial reporting. Surely someone over this 10-year period nearly would be able to put their finger on the metric that they could bring to us and show us that there's no doubt that it can be backed into this way. Everything can be checked out, that there's some obsolescence that they're requesting.
But you don't think that the appraisal, standalone by itself, did that?
I don't, because I don't have any way of verifying
Okay.
the information that's in the appraisal, because I didn't have the underlying information that the appraisal was formed from.
But you did hear Now, okay, so let's fast forward. Now you've heard from 4 different people who talked about how the information was reviewed and verified, and that there's no typos, there's no flip numbers, that the information that's in the appraisals actually reflects the financials and the company projections. Based on that, do you still think that the appraisal wasn't supported?
That it wasn't supported.
Yeah, that you couldn't rely on the numbers.
Well, they all testified that they were privy to that information that we were not privy to.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is 4 credible people said we reviewed it, we checked it, we filed it or whatever Ms. Cartwright called it, and that still doesn't give you the comfort level that you need to believe that those numbers are accurate.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, I've been doing this for 8 years. Regency, of course, I almost said Energy Transfer because it seems like we're talking about Energy Transfer, more than we are Regency. That's one company. I am a small parish. I've got 3 people besides myself, a total of 4. So, but I do have 11,000 some odd taxpayers. Now, mind you, the ones that are under the homestead limit, I hardly ever hear anything from. But believe you me, Regency's not the only one that I hear from requesting obsolescence. And
Let me
that was shocking to me when I came aboard at some of these things that these tax reps will throw at us just to see if it will stick.
Is Mr. Grace one of those tax reps that throws stuff at you to see if it will stick?
Had a good relationship with Steve. Like Rod said, I think he's an honest guy. We have some mutual hobbies that we talk about. And he shared emails with me on stuff from the oil and gas market and pipeline ventures, stuff like that. From time to time, we've communicated well. And I've tried to use that opportunity to learn more about how to do my job. Hey, we have a big responsibility as an assessor to put the values on these properties, okay? So I want to try to learn and do as well as I can.
When other taxpayers, and obviously no confidential information, but other businesses submit economic information that they believe substantiates economic obsolescence, and you review it. If you have questions about it, do you go back to them or do you simply toss it and stick with your assessment?
Well, generally, I will review the information. I'll go through my records. A lot of times what we see is commercial type properties, tax reps will come in and they'll have the economic age or the life of the property will be off by 10, 15 years. They'll have the square footage may be off by 1,000 square feet sometimes. So I'll check my information, which we field check all that. I'll send them that information and tell them your request is being denied and this is why. And then that's the last of it.
So if someone sent you information that you felt did perhaps indicate obsolescence, and I think you alluded to that earlier, that certainly everything that you've heard indicates that there may be some obsolescence in this property, would it not behoove you to reach out and say, I've looked at this, this is what I'm missing. What am I missing?
Again, that obligation rests on Regency.
So Mr. Elrod mentioned that he had some small gathering lines in his parish. Do you have any other gathering lines or other pipelines in your parish?
I do. I have some large lines similar to this one, actually, that owned by Energy Transfer, but are public service regulated, the Gulf Run.
Okay.
Similar pipeline. They reverse the compression to send gas south. It's doing really well. It's created some value for our parish. Okay. Likewise, and what I was talking about earlier about, and I think when Ms. Cartwright was up here yesterday, she was talking about if you took away Jackson, Caldwell, and Franklin, that it would have no value free from this other part of the system, which I tend to disagree because we have a receipt point there in the Vernon Field, which back in 2000, the time frame that all this stuff got started was, I think, the 6th largest reserves of natural gas in the United States. So you know, I think it would have some marketability to maybe no one but them, but they've got 500 gas wells right there that they need to send somewhere, which they're currently sending down the rig system, some of it, probably not all of it, because I think it does go different directions.
Mr. Romig asked you the question about, or asked Mr. Elrod the question about comparable pipeline sales. Are you aware of any comparable pipeline sales?
No, I am not.
Are you aware of any sales of segments of pipeline?
No, I am not. Other than the gathering system for the Compass, which was, used to be, well, going back to Mr. Anthony's testimony, it was Anadarko, then Exco, and now it's Compass. And so they have several lines that feed this line, that feed Tennessee Gas's line. I think feeds Gulf South some gas as well, but pretty large gathering system.
Okay. But there's no like, 1 mile segment that anybody bought out of the middle of it.
Not that I'm aware of. I take that back. There was, not similar to this, but there was TGNR bought out Range Resources, which was about 20 some odd wells with about 16 miles of gathering system. But 8-inch was the largest pipeline, so nothing of this size or nature.
So definitely not comparable to what Riggs has in your parish.
Definitely not.
Okay. Have you ever considered retaining a consulting group like Pritchard and Abbott to do the valuations of the Riggs pipeline property?
I haven't considered it specifically for rigs. I do talk to Rodney and Andrew from time to time, due to the fact that we've been, the last year or two now, we're having to use the DCF for our gas wells. So I have talked to him and been into several seminars where they're talking about that.
Okay, okay. I forgot to ask Mr. Elrod this question, so I'm just hoping that the answer is going to be yes. But do you know if the taxes that were paid are still being held in escrow?
Can I defer that to Mr. Elrod? No,
You think he's got your taxes?
no, they are being held in escrow, yes.
And you verify that every year?
I do. We actually keep a running tab in my office, which we're not required to do, just to help the sheriff keep his tab of what all is in escrow for all the different taxing bodies, because I do have calls from time to time wanting to know, how much is in escrow and when it's going to be released, and which I have no direct answer for.
I understand that. All right, just 1 second.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. That's all the questions.
Thank you.
Quick question. Ms. Elf was asking about, you heard Mr. Anthony's testimony where he stated that revenues have fallen from $11 million a month to $11 million a year. That's significant stuff, and I don't think anybody would deny that that might be an indicator of obsolescence. But getting back to what the regulations say, what they reference is that the assessor shall consider obsolescence as substantiated by the taxpayer in writing. Well, right here, I want to ask again. For any of the, and I can't show them to you because they're offered, but where are the actual financial statements? Mention that, I testified to you, Mr. Anthony, Mr. Lee, Mr. Watley, that they received from the financial banking were any of those reports provided?
No, they were not.
Questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions. Mr. Kirkland, I guess just, again, the methodology, income, market costs, nothing market, nothing income for you on these years. So you relied on cost only, right?
That's correct.
So you considered obsolescence only through cost.
Pardon me?
You considered obsolescence only through the cost method.
That's correct.
Were you aware of economic indicators and price changes through those years?
Are you talking about the price of natural gas? Yes.
So a decline in price didn't impact any consideration for obsolescence alone.
Not just the decline in price itself,
Okay.
no.
You said you researched some information last night on energy transfer. Is that correct?
Actually, not last night. I read over it last night, but it was back a little while. I've researched quite a bit. I've talked to Steve a lot, trying to learn more about this asset.
And what did you find? Did you find Energy's audited financial statements?
It's, I have it. I don't know if that's allowed or not. But it was a financial statement of Energy Transfer talking about their 23 revenues and compared to their 22 revenues and the forecast for 24. All their assets were up at least 5% or more on the flow of their gas through their pipelines. Some of the information there that I'm probably not fully qualified to interpret, but it was a lot of information. What I was looking for is trying to find some information on Regency.
So looking ahead and trying not to have this come back to us year over year, if you would have received the information that has been proffered, would that alone been sufficient information to validate the information that was in the appraisal and you would have considered the appraisal?
It's a possibility, but I don't know what lies therein, so I can't answer that.
If you would have received separate financial statements for rigs like there were in 2017 when it was required, would that have convinced you? And you would have,
Financials?
yes.
I think so.
So that's that's the deciding factor. If an entity can provide audited financial statements and an appraisal, you would use the audited financial statements to validate the appraisal?
Yes, just like Ms. Cartwright testified, and I think we all know, as long as you have the underlying information and you can calculate all that and you see it all ties together, then you have some substantiation of the information that you're looking at.
So I
But
have an
without
issue
that,
with
you
that.
don't-
I have
all
an
you
issue
can
with
do
that
is take it on its face value.
because audits are historical,
Pardon
right?
me?
Audits are historical. They're as of a date and for a period that has passed at the time that they are issued. But the income approach must consider a forecast, as you yourself acknowledge. So how do you as an assessor come to accept a projection?
I would probably reach out to someone like Rodney Crett, which are, they do valuations in the oil and gas market too. I
So,
don't myself know how to structure that forecast out to 29 like they have done.
but they engaged an expert, just as you would engage an expert.
I think I would.
Thank
yeah.
you.
I have the same question I asked Commissioner Elrod. Is it the taxpayer's responsibility or the assessor's responsibility is it the taxpayer's responsibility to provide the documentation needed by the assessor to validate a claim for obsolescence?
It is. It is the taxpayer's responsibility to providing and writing information to substantiate the obsolescence request that they're requesting.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kirkland, before you take off, I have just a couple follow-up questions. With respect to information provided in writing to substantiate obsolescence, each year you would get a cover letter with the renditions. Is that correct? You would get a cover letter that would have information, and then you would subsequently get an open roll letter from property tax partners.
That's correct.
So I've got a couple of pages of it. You've got, in 1 year, there was the taxpayer, page 70. There's the Riggs valuations. It's got the financial history. It's got the USPAP appraisal value. It's got, a description about the tax commission pipeline and compressor cost schedules. It's got a reference to this must be for 2022 because it has a reference to the compressor runs, analysis and the utilization study. There's information about the asset utilization, information about the rig sale. Is that not information that substantiates obsolescence?
That's information. There's a lot of information that they send, but none of the underlying information that they use to form those letters that you're referring to there was provided to me.
Well, you were here last year, though. You heard Mr. Anthony testify about the sale, and you heard he and Mr. Lee talk about the well, probably not the impairment, but talk about the contracts and what happened with the contracts and the revenue cliff. And you yourself know that the income went from, as you said, $11 million a month to $11 million a year. So how is it that that's not, and I guess this is the question, is it not that that isn't evidence that substantiates obsolescence, but it's not, do you find it not sufficient evidence?
Well, I've just heard them talk about it. They haven't showed me anything as
But-
far as contracts or anything of that nature.
So you want them to show you contracts?
What I'm saying is I've heard them talk about it last year. This year, we heard some of the same talk. Now, this year, all of a sudden, these other things have been proffered in, which I don't know what that entails.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, before you step away, Mr. Kirkland, was there a compressor removed off of your tax rolls?
No, sir, not that I'm aware.
Okay, thank you.
One last question, Assessor Kirkland. Commissioner Romick had asked you that, had you received the actual source data, would you have been able to verify the information in Ms. Cartwright's appraisal? You clearly testified yes. But the fact remains that you do not value property based upon business enterprise value, do you?
I do not.
So it's really kind of a twofold problem, just to be clear. In addition to not having the supporting documentation, the methodology she utilized is not applicable to the valuation of property in Jackson Parish, is it?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
I'm gonna turn myself off. I have one follow-up. Is business enterprise value an indication of economic obsolescence?
Within itself, well, what she's been saying is the business enterprise value compared to the schedule or RCNLD, that's what they're trying to say. The separation therein is obsolescence. We don't use the business enterprise value. Now, that tends to the unit method, as they've been talking about here, which is used for public service properties. Okay, we're under different guidelines on the way we value properties than those that are valued by the LTC and the public service.
But you are required to consider obsolescence.
That is an element of fair market value, yes.
And do you believe that the business enterprise value in this case is an indicator that there is economic obsolescence in this system?
With the information I have, I would have to rely solely on Mrs. Cartwright's business enterprise value, that all that information is correct. But no, I don't know that the difference in the two, I don't think is economic obsolescence.
What do you think that difference reflects?
Well, it could reflect a lot of things.
Such as?
It could reflect business decisions made by Energy Transfer.
So again, but back to the appraisal, if you have the appraisal and it is presented to you as evidence of obsolescence, you still wouldn't find it credible? It's done by an independent third party, person paid by fee, doesn't matter what the answer is, she still gets paid, doesn't have a dog in the hunt.
I've read it every year that I've got it. It's all similar. The values change a little bit over the course of the years, but it's pretty much all the same.
Do other taxpayers in your parish, come to you with appraisals?
Uh, for fee appraisers for homes, nothing like
Nothing like this.
this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Questions by the commission?
Yeah, just one last one. So on the enterprise value, you're not considering that as an element of obsolescence, but when you calculate obsolescence, if you were, you would include the income approach, the market approach, and cost approach?
Could you repeat that, please, sir?
When you consider obsolescence, you by law must consider income, market, and cost.
Right?
Okay. In Ms. Cartwright's report, do you understand the methodologies that were used to calculate enterprise value?
Yes, I'm
Were they income, market, and cost?
in her approach.
Mhm.
They were income, and then she used the other terminology
It was a
guidelines.
market, but there was not an immediate sale, so she used a global factor, but it was still
Right,
a market
because there was no
consideration
market.
and a cost. So those are the same three ingredients to your consideration of obsolescence. Do you agree? Income, market, and cost?
Three approaches, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
What I'm not sure about is the difference between the two is all economic obsolescence.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, as my last witness, I would like to call Assessor Scott Meredith. Good afternoon, Assessor Meredith. Can you identify yourself and identify your current position?
Scott Meredith is on. Assessor Caldwell Parish,
And how long have you been the assessor of Caldwell Parish?
20 years.
And you are a certified Louisiana assessor?
Yes, I am.
Now, Regency has filed appeals from your assessments every year since 2014, have they not?
That's correct.
And I want to turn to the two specific years at issue in this case, tax years 22 and 23. And for tax year 2022, Regency requested a 49% obsolescence reduction. So this assessed value equaled an allocated fair market valuation of the business enterprise of Regency Haynesville Intrastate LLC. I want to start by asking you, what information did Regency provide you in support of this obsolescence request, again, for valuation at operating business enterprise value?
They sent us a business enterprise appraisal.
And just so I have to go through this twice, and they did the same thing for tax year 2023, did they not?
That's correct.
And you were here earlier when Ms. Cartwright testified, were you not?
That's correct.
And you heard her testify about all the information that she received from Energy Transfer and that she utilized to conduct her appraisal, did you not?
That's correct.
And was any of the supporting documentation upon which the appraisal was based provided to your office?
No, it was not.
Now, again, this is something I just addressed with Assessor Kirkland. I want to make clear that it's my understanding that even if you had the information, the actual data to verify Ms. Cartwright's calculations, you still don't value property based upon business enterprise value, do you?
No, I do not,
And,
because of the rules and regulations of the state.
okay, and what is it specifically that you assess?
I assess property and tangible assets in the parish of Caldwell.
And what does the valuation of this entire business enterprise? Again, it's, it's a pipeline that runs all the way almost from Texas to Mississippi. What does the value of that entire business enterprise tell you about the value
It
of
does,
Regency's property in Caldwell Parish?
it does not affect the value of the property in Caldwell Parish as per the state regulations.
And I noticed in Caldwell Parish, since there's been all this talk about how different segments might be worth different amounts, you've got three different major delivery interconnect points in Caldwell Parish, do you not?
That's correct.
Well, I guess just to ask the ultimate question for tax years 2022 and 2023, did you consider the obsolescence requests based upon operating business enterprise value of Regency Interstate Gas sufficient evidence of a loss in Caldwell Parish to warrant a reduction in value for obsolescence?
Not, I considered the obsolescence, but I did not, I did not consider the business enterprise appraisal because it did not follow the state regulations.
And again, that's because you don't value the business enterprise, you just value the property in
Correct.
Caldwell Parish, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to jump into this. You mentioned a moment ago that you've been receiving appeals since 2014, correct?
That's correct.
And you recall in the hearings for tax years 20 and 21, well, there's no beating around the bush. You lost your temper, didn't you?
Yes, sir, I did.
And I know that Chairman Shahardy called you out on it.
Yes, sir, he did.
Said that Assessor Meredith's testimony plainly evidenced a bias towards the taxpayer and or its tax representatives, and that Assessor Meredith's testimony was not credible due to his clear bias, coupled with a lack of any articulated analysis or explanation as how Ms. Cartwright's appraisals were considered and rejected.
Yes, he did say that.
I want to unpack this. In his ruling, Chairman Shahardy referenced your vague testimony that the appraisals did not contain anything addressing the value of Regency's property in Caldwell Parish. Now, you heard both Stephen Grace and Ms. Cartwright admit that there is nothing in the appraisal that addresses the value of Regency's property located in Caldwell Parish.
That's correct.
So let me ask you again, what does a business enterprise valuation appraisal tell you about the value of Regency's property in Caldwell Parish?
And nothing.
You also heard Mr. Grace testify that he did have the ability to provide information on a parish-specific basis,
Correct.
but he didn't do so, did he?
No, he did not.
Now, you heard both Assessor Elrod and Assessor Kirkland talk about that under Louisiana Constitution, their duty is to value the property located in their parish, in your case, Caldwell Parish.
That's correct.
And is that why you rejected Regency's obsolescence request in tax years 22 and 23?
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, it is not.
Okay, so, no. Was the reason you rejected Regency's obsolescence request in tax years 22 and 23 because the only information you received had to do with the business enterprise value and not the value of the property in Caldwell Parish?
Exactly. Correct. That is correct.
And again, Chairman Shahardy specifically pointed to the fact that you lost your temper as proof of bias
That's correct.
for the taxpayer and or its taxpayer representatives, and we need to talk about that. And I believe this goes back to tax year 2014.
That's right.
And I understand that is a year there was an issue about misreporting.
That's correct.
Can you tell me about that?
No,
Let me
this
turn
is
myself-
very important.
I'm going to inject to this line of questioning. What happened back in 2014 with reporting has nothing to do with what happened in 2022 and 2023.
It's very relevant.
I'm not an attorney, but we've sat here and we've listened going back to 2010, 2000, whatever, so I'm gonna allow it.
Last year,
Question is noted.
last year, I made the same objection and
I
Mr.
wasn't here
Hart,
last year and I
I-
wasn't chairman.
I understand that.
Moving on, we're going to allow it. You can object.
It's
Thank you.
very important to understand where all this crap came from. There was Mike Smith reported $20 million. I was a new assessor.
And who is Mike Smith, just to
He's
be clear?
He's with that bunch,
Property tax partner?
property tax partner. Came in, said $20 million. Sounded good to me. I'm a new assessor. The deputy assessor, little girl, came in and says, you can't trust a tax rep. And I said, no, I'm not. There's no reason to question him. He seemed to be a fine man. And I'm not gonna start that way, being paranoid. She goes to the building permit office and brings back the building permit for 60 million. The district attorney wanted to file suit for fraud, property tax fraud, and I talked him out of it. So I'm not biased. If I was, I would have let him done it, and it was hard to talk him out of it. And then when he files, Mike Smith files, he files a week late. If you file late in Louisiana, you lose your right to protest. And I told property tax, I'm not trying to play that game. I could have put it on at 60 million. But I said, I'm not trying, all I want is what's fair. And so then said, y'all can protest. And then I go hire Pritchard and Abbott, which is the most reputable appraisers in the petroleum industry in the United States. And Caldwell Parish is paying for it. And they come up with 47 million. And I asked them, I said, well, why do they have a $60 million permit? And they said, Scott, this is it. We're a reputable company and 47 million is what it is. So that's what we put it on. And we hire them every year to update it, and it depreciates every year. It's going down every year. I'm doing it by the book. And for that man to call me biased is very offensive.
Okay, and Assessor Meredith, I just want to be clear because again, this is all in the record from last year. Since 2014, you have turned the valuation of the compressor stations over, or you've retained the services of Pritchard and Abbott, and you have followed whatever they recommended, correct?
Yes, they revalue it every year, and the piping.
Now, in the 2 years it issued, tax years 22 and 23, again, Pritchard and Abbott buy the compressor stations. I understand that's the bulk of the value in Caldwell Parish,
That's correct.
and you simply adopt their recommendations, whatever they are,
That's
correct?
correct.
Now on the pipe, you do value the pipe yourself, do you not?
Well, I do, but I'm review it with Pritchard and Abbott.
Okay, and for the reasons you testified earlier, again, you testified that you don't value pipeline assets based upon business enterprise value. Is that why you rejected the obsolescence request in tax years 22 and 23?
Yes, that's also what Pritchard and Abbott told me to do. But the way I was doing, I was following the law.
Thank you, Assessor Meredith. Please answer any questions the commissioners or Ms. Adolph may have.
Mr. Meredith, as part of the classes to become a certified assessor, are you required to learn how to calculate economic obsolescence?
Yes, I am, but Pritchard and Abbott's a lot smarter than I am. And so that's why I let them do it.
And functional obsolescence as well?
That's correct.
Okay. You are familiar with the Louisiana equation,
Yes, yes.
the same one I asked Mr. Elrod and
Yeah,
Mr.
yeah,
Kirkland?
Yeah, we
So-
got to pass that little test.
Yeah, so- And so you would agree that if your assessment does not include obsolescence that's present, that it would not equal fair market value?
That's correct.
And you agree that your requirement is to determine fair market value?
That's correct.
All right. So after everything that you've heard last year and the last 2 days, do you still believe that your assessments are fair market value?
Yes, I do.
is it because you don't believe that there is any obsolescence in the pipeline, or is it because you don't believe the taxpayers have substantiated it?
I don't think they've substantiated it. The other thing is, you know, you talk about all the information they've given us. Well, if your pipeline, it's 50% capacity and you say, okay, my pipeline's only worth 50%, that's not honest. The pipeline's worth more than 50%. Come on, let's be real. So
Well,
that's
aren't-
not good faith. That's not good faith coming to me. So that's why the burden's on you
Yeah,
to
okay.
get the information to me, okay?
I-
First of all, it was not in good faith sending it to me saying, reduce my pipeline, it's only worth 50% of it. It's
So-
worth more than that.
So I assume that you read in the submissions that there was a compressor and capacity study that was done that said that, the 42-inch pipe could be replaced with a 36-inch pipe.
Yeah, it's less, but it's not 50% less.
So it's 2/3 less,
I don't know,
25%
but y'all
less.
supposed to prove that. That's on you.
But so doesn't that analysis indicate to you that there is obsolescence, and isn't that proof?
No, you didn't prove it. All you did is said, oh, it's 50% less.
No, sir, I'm saying we included a chart with an analysis that was conducted by an engineer
You-
that,
You went all over the place.
so
And you had an awful lot of it was opinions in there. I listened to every bit of that. And there's an awful lot of, first of all, oil and gas is a speculative business. And there were an awful lot of opinions and awful lot of charts. And this is what I project. And if you had 3 different of those type business enterprise assessments, appraisals from 3 different people, guarantee you'd have those 3 appraisals would be all over the chart, different from a tangible property assessment that the state requires.
So you heard Ms. Cartwright's testimony, though, that a business enterprise value captures the value of all the tangible assets because it is the outside limit of what any willing buyer would pay to purchase these assets.
I agree, that was her opinion. The
You-
bottom line was her opinion. And if you had 2 more, there'd be 2 different opinions. So no, I'm not going to accept that. And the law tells us not to anyway.
Where does the law tell you
The
that
law
a
tells
business
you it
enterprise
tells-
value does not capture all of the value of the tangible assets?
It tells us how to do it. It does not say use business enterprise. And your friend Richard Abbott, our buddy, he just called this morning. He's got a case, just finished up this morning. And your side had the business enterprise and they lost this morning in court.
That was in court in Louisiana?
Well, no, but I'll find out, let you know.
It was in Texas. We know what Rodney was doing. He was in
Yeah.
Texas.
Well, lost.
Um,
Right.
So I guess I will ask you the same question. We go round and round year after year about what information you believe would substantiate obsolescence. And
Y'all
it-
could have a better attitude. You got 10 years. Come with more information. Come with something different than saying it's 50%, I'm 50% capacity, so I want, it's 50% off on the value. That's not honest.
So every year, I've been working with this company for years, and every year it seems like the letters that they send to you.
Your letters, that's
and the-
about it.
So do you?
More
do-
information.
So it's
Substantial.
information that you don't believe?
Oh, I don't doubt that, but you got to substantiate it. You're saying the burden's on us. No, I got 10,000 people in my little parish and I got more things to deal with than just him.
I am not suggesting that the burden is on you, sir, but I am suggesting that when taxpayers present information to you and it is,
He's with the
Indicative
big
of
company as he's
obsolescence.
got and bigger staff, he should be able to figure it out. That's what he's paid for.
so is there anything that they could submit to you that would indicate obsolescence?
I think he's a very smart man and I think he needs to try a little harder.
Okay, so you're not going to tell us what you believe substantiates obsolescence in a pipeline? Natural gas pipeline.
He ought to be able to figure that one out. All right.
Okay.
I'm not going to hold his hand.
So I believe you testified last year that that you did not use forecasts, company forecasts in any of your assessment practice?
Not that I recall.
Okay, so had you gotten information? I think you
I'm-
heard
I-
all the
Let
testimony.
me back up. I use Pritchard and Abbott, all right?
Okay.
I'm not gonna second guess Pritchard and Abbott. you know.
Okay.
They're a lot smarter than me. Ain't no need going there.
All right. So, well, let me ask you this. Did you send the appraisals to Pritchard and Abbott?
No, I talked to them about it.
Okay. So, did Pritchard and Abbott express any concerns about the validity or veracity of the information that was contained in the appraisals?
No, I talked to him, I told him what kind of appraisal it was, and he told me about the lawsuit going on, and then he told me he was very confident that the way that we were doing the appraisal is the way Pritchard and Abbott was lined us out how to do them, is the way they were supposed to be done by the state regulations.
Okay. So the state regulations require you to consider obsolescence and that
Yes,
fair
and
market.
and that was insufficient information that we had,
And
and he
that-
agreed.
And Pritchard and Abbott concluded, and you also concluded that the information provided was insufficient.
I definitely did.
Okay. Just to clarify, is it that you thought there wasn't in terms of quantity of evidence, or was your objection to the quality of the evidence?
I think he needs to figure it out. Come on.
That's all the questions I have at this time. Thank you, Mr. Meredith.
Ronnie and Cross? Okay, questions by the commission?
Yes, you're expecting something. Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Meredith.
Yes, sir.
You say you consider obsolescence.
Yes, sir.
That consideration is solely by engaging Pritchard and Abbott?
No, I would consider, you know.
Is it a yes? Do you?
Yes, I
do
would-
you
yes.
consider it independent of Pritchard and Abbott?
Yes, I would consider it independent. You know, I take
Do
everything,
you-
but
Do you do
no,
a calculation independent of Pritchard and
No.
Abbott?
No, I mean, I ran them, but I'm not gonna do anything without running it by Pritchard and Abbott before I give any.
So you solely rely upon Pritchard and Abbott
Pretty
to
much.
come up with
Yes, sir, pretty much.
an economic or functional obsolescence?
Yes, sir, pretty much, yes.
Has that report ever been shared back with the
No,
taxpayer?
I have not. That's only been over the phone. I didn't, both of us agreed that it did not get to the level where it justified it.
So did Pritchard and Abbott actually issue a
No,
report?
No, they did not. No.
Is there a contract with Pritchard and Abbott to opine on this?
No, I have a contract with them to oversee my, a contract with Caldwell Parish for us where they do the appraisals, but I don't have on this specific situation, no.
So you didn't consider obsolescence because you were relying on Pritchard and Abbott. They did not provide a report because you did not engage them to do that. And you didn't
On this, you're
give
right,
Miss,
you're right.
and didn't give Miss Cartwright's appraisal any credence in your consideration of obsolescence.
I read it, I did give it credence, and I didn't think it was sufficient. No, I did not.
So I'll ask a similar question that I asked of the two previous assessors. Had the information that's being proffered been presented to you, would you or your staff have accepted that as reasonable information to substantiate that the information presented in Ms. Cartwright's appraisal was accurate?
Very probably, but I wouldn't do anything without running it by Pritchard and Abbott.
But they're not engaged in this matter.
Well, they would be engaged before I'd go sign off on
We're
it.
talking about 2022 and 2023.
Well.
They were not engaged, were they?
I have an overall general contract, so I don't sign off on anything like that without running it by them.
But again, there's nothing in writing from them,
I have a contract with them, a general advisor.
not specific to this.
Not specific to that. Not specific to that, no.
Okay. If you, under your responsibility as assessor, were to perform to consider obsolescence, you were required to use an income, a market, and a cost approach, correct?
Right?
Have you done that?
No,
Okay. Do you agree that the income, market, and cost approach in hearing Ms. Cartwright's testimony and actually receiving her reports included those three methodologies?
yes, it did.
Okay, so that then she, in theory, is complying with state law and using the
in theory-
methodologies for obsolescence.
In theory, but I thought her overall, there was an awful lot of speculation and opinions that were, that another appraiser of her same type on that same type of appraisal would come to a different conclusion.
And your experience would validate that. You can support that through either your thought process or an independent appraiser's thought process.
That's my opinion.
So you say 50% is not acceptable. What is acceptable?
I don't know, I'd have to go over it with Pritchard and that before I did anything, but I'm saying, I just think if you're going 50% capacity, all of a sudden you're saying my pipeline's worth 50% less is not,
So did you award any obsolescence?
nope.
Zero.
No, I didn't think that was a good faith offer, but I did consider it. But I didn't think what they sent didn't meet the requirements.
In your consideration of
That-
obsolescence or lack thereof, since you didn't do it yourself or
Right.
engage someone else to do it, you just feel it's a number. Were you aware of economic conditions with natural gas flow in your region?
Yes,
So that wouldn't factor into your consideration of
Yes.
obsolescence.
yes, it was.
And you still said 0%.
That's correct. Under all things considered.
Income approach, market approach, and cost approach. Those, you went through all of those three and came to a 0%.
Not in detail.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The same question I had, but I'm gonna phrase it a little different. After the taxpayer asked for 45%, whatever it was, 40 percentage of it, and y'all were told, you said no. Did they come back and ask for anything less?
No,
Thank you. Any other questions by the commission? Okay.
Commissioners, I have no further witnesses.
Is there any question?
Can I have just a moment to confer with my client before we conclude? We may have, the reason I ask is that we may have a rebuttal question.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Thank you, sir.